So today I'm going to start our second project, which is going to be the abstract plaster sculpture. Um, as I mentioned before, I think you should first come up with some sort of a sketch. And you can see on the right there, I came up with a sketch. I am trying to imagine sort of this larger form that's sort of a conical form. It kind of has connotations of corn on the cob. It has connotations of a flower pot, aloe plant, tentacles, octopus, plants, suction cups, especially the interior parts. I'm looking at something that's smooth on the outside and textured on the inside. I drew my piece with just drawing pencils, and I used some color pencils to create a little bit of an atmosphere in the background, just to add a little color to it. On the left, you can see I have a plaster block. This is what I'm hoping to make it out of. One of the things I considered when I made this block is trying to make something about the same sort of height. I didn't have anything really narrow. I guess I could have used like kind of a Coca-Cola bottle or soda bottle if I wanted to, but I wanted it maybe even a little taller than that. So I found this other, it was some sort of a pretzel bottle or something like that that I filled with plaster that's going to use as the main part of my sculpture. Okay, so I'm going to take I have a big piece of clay here. This was what was left over from my self-portrait head. And the first thing I'm doing is I'm kind of rolling it out. This piece of clay probably will not go in the kiln, although it could. Just in case it goes in the kiln, I'm going to try to compress it a little bit. And I want to roll it out kind of to start the form of it. So I want to think about when I'm making my plaster sculpture, before I make the plaster sculpture, to come up with sort of a clay model that I can use so that I can think about what is it that I want to remove in the piece. Okay, in this piece, in the creation of the piece, I realized that the top part is much more curved than the bottom. The bottom is actually going to be smaller, and I'm going to incorporate a sense of balance by having a smaller base than the main part of the sculpture. So when I'm taking my clay, I'm going to use a paddle, and I'm going to really try to force down that clay and create a curve. Paddle is very useful in creating the form and making it even. Okay, so the basic form of my sculpture is about the same size as the plaster form now. So I'm still going to do the inside. So my next step is I'm going to let the clay dry out a little bit, and then I'll carve out the inside. And then once the clay form is done, then I'll start into the plaster form. Let's start in a little of the extraction, if you would. Kind of just did a loose design on the inside here. I'm going to use my ribbon tool and start to remove some of the clay. It's not exactly how I want it, but the idea is to just get it started and start going in the right direction. When I get finally into the whole of the inside, I will have, it's going to be much more textured. It's going to be almost like little suction cups in there or some sort of environment. But I feel like if I can just get it started going through, eventually it'll go all the way through, which is what I want to do with the plaster as well. I want to remove some clay. And it's a little too wet to actually do this properly, but I want to get it started so I have a sense of where I'm going before I get there. Some of this is going to be a lot easier to do now. Once the clay dries up, it's going to be a lot harder, but I want to have just a start of a cavity so that when I get into the extraction. Now, when I'm doing this with the plaster, obviously I'm going to be doing this part with the hammer and chisel. So it's kind of helpful to get my mindset around what it is I'm going to remove, how I'm going to make the form, and then how I'm going to remove the interior. And so it's kind of what I'm prepping myself for as I go through. And I could go a lot slower here so that I can really think about the details, but I think it makes more sense right now just to get some extraction, because I've got to go all the way through. So I'd like to get some extraction, and as you can see from the drawing, the opening is much bigger. So when I get into the details of the opening, I'll use a knife or I'll use a tool that's a little more detailed to get in there. So right now I'm just creating the opening and the crevice. And then, as I said before, I'm going to let this dry quite a bit. Make it more leather hard before I get into the minutia detail.